In the previous lecture, we looked at Bloom's taxonomy, and we saw that of Bloom's taxonomy, the foundational layer is remembering. And so before we can work our way up to understand, apply, and analyze, we need to have a foundation of facts, concepts, and ideas. And that remember level requires that information, again, facts, concepts, ideas, what have you, these are in our memory, that we are able to recall and recognize these. Well, we need this information to be not in our short-term memory, but in our long-term memory. And in that lecture, I said that the primary way to get this information into our long-term memory is by using flashcards. So we'll compare and contrast short-term and long-term memory. We're also going to talk about why we forget, how not to forget. I will explain what flashcards are, and then I will show you my flashcard system. And we will conclude looking at my favorite SRS, or spaced repetition software, or spaced repetition system. And that is Anki. Very quickly, I want to compare and contrast the concepts of short-term and long-term memory. When we refer to short-term memory, we're talking about that part of our memory that briefly holds information for somewhere around 15 to 30 seconds. Our short-term memory is limited. We can store somewhere between maybe 3 to 5 items at once. And this is meant to be a temporary working space, something that we need to remember for immediate use. Long-term memory, however, this is where we are storing information indefinitely. And our long-term memory, unlike short-term memory, has an unlimited capacity. So your name, certain features of your own biography, these are things that are going to be stored in your long-term memory. You are likely to remember these things forever, if not for a very long time. And so biologically, why do we forget? Why can't we just remember everything? Well, when it comes to remembering or to forgetting, one phrase that I think is really important is use it or lose it. And really, when you think about it from a species point of view, from a biological point of view, forgetfulness is the default state of our brain. And this is because we encounter a vast amount of information every day, and most of that information you do not need to remember. You don't need to remember what color socks you wore last Tuesday. This type of information is not useful. And so what forgetting does is it filters out for us what is useful and what is not useful. The problem is that our brain itself doesn't really know what is useful and what is not useful. It relies on the frequency with which we access memories to determine what is useful and what is not useful. And so how do we not forget something? We want to move these ideas, concepts, and facts from short-term to long-term memory. And so this process of moving information from our short-term memory, again, where we're remembering something perhaps only for a few seconds, to long-term memory, where we can remember it indefinitely. This process is called synaptic consolidation. And so what are some things that we can do to convert information into long-term memory? Well, we need active rehearsal, again, where we're actively reviewing and working with this information. Spaced repetition, meaning that we're doing it on a frequent basis, perhaps daily or every couple days. And finally, deliberate recall. Again, you need to intentionally and deliberately access these memories on a regular basis in order for it to consolidate in your long-term memory. One of my favorite quotations is, neurons that fire together, wire together. The more often you access these memories, again, these ideas, these concepts, these facts that you're going to learn throughout the course, the more often you do that, the stronger those connections are going to become, and the easier it's going to be for you to recall these memories when you need them on the exam. So a flashcard is a piece of paper or an index card. This is two-sided, and on one side of the index card or the sheet of paper, you write a question. On the other side, you write the answer to the question. And this is how I use flashcards. So I'm looking at the question side, I read the question, And then without looking at the answer, I try to recall from memory what the answer is. Now, if you're looking at this particular question and answer pair for the first time, you probably need to cheat. You probably need to look at the answer. So you take a look at the answer and then you flip it back over. You read the question again, and then you try to recall the answer from memory. And I'll do this for maybe 3, 4, 5 questions. And the key here, when you're trying to do a stack of flashcards, you don't want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yada, 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 all the way to the end. Maybe you have a stack of 30 cards that you're going through. What you want to do is you want to stagger those. So you go a little bit out and then you go back. For example, my pattern is, and I'm talking about cards here, card 1, card 2, card 3. I will go 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. When I'm able to do all 3 of those questions from memory, then I go to the next. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Again, once I have all 5 of those down pat, then I will go to the next few. 6, 7, 8, 8, 7, 6, 6, 7, 8, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's tedious, it's laborious, it's time consuming, but it works for me. And I think once you're trained in this method of brute memorization, you can do maybe a stack of 40 to 50 cards in an hour or so. So that's how I use flashcards. In the next slide, I want to show you how I actually make my flashcards. And so what you see here on the left-hand side, I have the AIGP Certification Masterclass opened up. On the right-hand side, I have a document open in Microsoft Word. And you'll see that this document is just a very simple table with 2 columns and a bunch of rows. So for whatever I'm learning, whatever exam I'm preparing for, I have it open on my screen like this. I really like watching and listening to lectures online. And so I will have that screen or course open on the left-hand side, and then I have my Word document open on the right. And I will go through the course. As I'm going through the course, when I encounter something that I feel like I need to remember, I will pause the course, and then I will come over here to my table and I will write the question. The lecture that you're looking at here, this is, I believe, the very first lecture on what is artificial intelligence. And this slide in particular, this is talking about the Turing test. And so my question is going to be, what is the Turing test? Question mark. And then I'll go over to the answer. And it's totally fine to just copy whatever you have on the screen here. And so for here, I'm going to abbreviate this a little bit. So my answer is going to be machine demonstrates behavior from humans. And that's not actually a good answer. So what's the Turing test? Say the Turing test is a test that demonstrates whether a machine can show behavior indistinguishable from humans. So something like that. And you can play around with it, okay? Maybe this isn't the exact answer you use, but this is just an example. So I go through the content. Every time I come across something useful, something I want to remember, I hit pause, I write a question, I write an answer, and then I move on to the next one. So I'll do one more example. So let me just move ahead here. All right, so this is another good one. So the question here, and again, this is definitely something you want to remember for the exam. This is, what are the shared features of AI? Now, what I do when I'm creating my questions is I will often give myself, maybe not a hint per se, but I will set parameters or a scope for the question that helps me answer appropriately. And so in this case, what I do is I will write the number 4 in parentheses after the question. And what this does is when I'm reading the question, again, what are the shared features of AI? I see the number 4 there. And this tells me that there are 4 answers. If I want a complete answer, it needs to include 4 features. And so for me, it's going to be autonomy, human involvement, and output. All right. Now, another thing that I will do, and this is just me getting a bit crazy, is I will often reorganize the answers to create some type of mnemonic device. And so for me, this one, the mnemonic device is going to be, it's not a mnemonic device. I'm going to create a little word to help me out. And the little word is going to be hatto. And HATO, H-A-T-O, this is taking the first letter of each of the answers. And so when I'm trying to remember what are the shared features of AI, there are 4. I'm going to think, oh, HATO, H for human involvement, A for autonomy, T for technology, O for output. So this is how I make my questions and answers, my flashcards. And then I print out the piece of paper when I'm done. I usually limit myself to about 4 or 5 pages. So during my study sessions, I will create 4 to 5 pages of these quote unquote flashcards, and then I print them out, I commit them to memory, and then I move them into the Anki software. And we're going to get to Anki in just a minute. I know what you're thinking to yourself now. Well, these aren't really flashcards. This is just a piece of paper. And yeah, you're right. When I was doing my doctorate, I actually wrote out more than 5,000 flashcards by hand. It was useful for my memory to go through that process, but it was way too time consuming. I think for the AIGP exam, I had maybe somewhere around 700 or 800 flashcards, but I didn't write them out by hand. It took too much time. I was too busy to do that. And so instead, I'll take this piece of paper, again, questions on one side, answers on the other. I print this out on an A4 piece of paper, and then where you see the divide in the table, I fold the piece of paper in half. And so I start at the top of the questions column. What is the Turing test? If I can answer it, I'll flip to the back. Is my answer correct? Yes. And then I go on to the next question. And so I'm just holding a piece of paper that I've folded in half, and I'm just flipping back and forth. And so that's my flashcard system. If you have your own, please stick with whatever works for you. If you're looking for ideas, then maybe this has provided you with some inspiration. Finally, for this slide, I want to leave you with a product recommendation. Full disclosure, I have no partnership with Anki whatsoever. So I earn no money whatsoever for referring you to this. I am making this suggestion because I am a long-term user of this. I think it is absolutely fantastic. I've been using Anki for well over a decade. I think maybe I started in 2008 or 2009. So yeah, it's been a long time. Anki is a spaced repetition system or spaced repetition software application. You can use it on both desktop and on mobile. I believe the desktop version is free, but if you want to purchase it for your smartphone, I believe there's a fee to do that. And essentially what Anki does is it manages all of your flashcards for you, and it reminds you when to review. And this is really key. Once you have committed the flashcard to memory, it reminds you when to review it next. And so something that's brand new, something that you learned today, it's going to remind you tomorrow. And then it'll probably also remind you the day after tomorrow. And if on each of these reviews you successfully answer the question, then that time frame between reviews is going to grow. If you answer incorrectly, however, then Anki will prompt you to review sooner, maybe later in the day or maybe tomorrow. And so what the Anki algorithm does is it learns when you need to review to make your review sessions most efficient. In this lecture, we went over how to get information from short-term to long-term memory. Remember that short-term memory is about 15 to 30 seconds, whereas long-term memory can be indefinite. We forget information because we don't need to remember it. Forgetfulness is the default state of our mind. If we're not going to use something, then we're going to lose it. We encounter vast amounts of information every day. And what forgetting does is it filters what is useful and what is not useful. The problem is our brains themselves don't know what is useful and what is not useful. We need to regularly use memories. We need to access those memories in order for our brains to understand that, hey, this is something I should keep around a little bit longer. Techniques that we've talked about include active rehearsal, spaced repetition, and deliberate recall. Flashcards can help you with all of that. Again, a flashcard, this is just a two-sided index card or sheet of paper. You have questions on one side, answers on the other. And by far, my favorite tool is Anki. This is an app that you can download for desktop or mobile from ankiweb.net or from your app store.